Davis, host and producer of OmniU Presents the H3O Art of Life show. And we are back to a sober subject, and it's actually a question and not a statement. It's called civil rights or civil wrongs. And we have here with us tonight two very interesting young women who are very avid writers. One of them, Liane Casten, is the major journalist in the Chicago Media Watch Report. Something that you should read, something that you should subscribe to. And she will be speaking out on a lot of issues at a lot of levels because she has a lot of information to share. And Marielle Johnson, who is a wonderful woman who has sacrificed so much of her life to trying to relieve some of the suffering of inmates in the criminal injustice system. And she has written a monograph called Tainted Justice. Welcome to TAMS, home of the first Supermax, a good place to live. And this is the powerful story of a struggling mom and an entombed son at a Supermax prison. This book is still being revised, but Marielle Johnson herself is here, and she can talk to us about the struggles to try to keep human contact with the people who are incarcerated in Supermax prisons, who are confined to their cells for 23 or more hours a day, and who are, as Liane has said, have to be subjected to cruel and inhuman punishment for really no good reason at all. So we're here to talk about civil liberties, that is to say civil rights and civil wrongs, and I just want to open this with the whole idea that Malcolm X once corrected us when we were all on a quest for civil rights, and he said it is not just a question of civil rights, it's a question of human rights. And so we are here to talk about human rights and how those rights are in peril and what kind of information we need to have in order to make the best decisions that we can make in these circumstances. Marielle, what have you been doing of late, and how hard is it to do it?
Well, the latest efforts that have been forth is to bring the community and the families into this struggle. The family members have to understand that there's really no justification for not loving your relatives. You don't have to stop loving them just because the system say they're wrong, because you need to really check out the system that's giving them these grades. Mm-hmm. And the thing that makes it so easy for the people to get away with mistreating and doing different things to African Americans especially is because we feel shame to speak out. It's something that keeps us from being mobilized and demanding that we be respected. Mm-hmm. Even in the visiting rooms, families are humiliated to the point where they say, well, I won't even come back. I don't want to deal with this.
In what ways are they humiliated, Marielle?
Well, they're treated like they're criminals, mm-hmm. you know, and that's one reason why I always say that we have to be careful how we let people treat the least of us, because mm-hmm. eventually it comes back to the rest of us. Mm-hmm. I myself, being a mother of an inmate, mm-hmm. I know how dehumanizing you are made to feel as a visitor. Mm-hmm. I go and try to involve other relatives. Many inmates tell their family members, don't come. Mm-hmm. I don't want you to have to go through that. Mm-hmm. They want to strip search you. A 74-year-old woman, they strip searched her and she was humiliated because she didn't have anything on her, but that was just something that they do at random. Mm-hmm. This lady was so embarrassed till she just said she wasn't going to ever come back. Mm-hmm. If she had refused to let them search her, she didn't know it was going that far. Mm-hmm. they would have denied her the privilege of coming to see her grandson. And he found out about what happened, and he told her not to come back. You know, so this thing happens over and over. But the thing that bothers me most is that so many family members feel that it takes something from them when they go. You know, I go out and I speak, and people come up to me afterwards and tell me, well, I got a nephew who's in jail, or my son is in jail, my grandson's there. But they haven't felt free to say anything about it. So it's like we have been put in a position where we're ashamed of our pain. And I tell the mothers often, I say, well, for the Christians who believe in the Bible, you know, when everyone else turned against Jesus, Mary was there. She was there weeping because she loved her son, and she didn't even have to explain that. So that's the way I feel about my son. I don't have to explain the fact that he's my son. And people say, well, you talk about jail all the time because you have a son in jail. I said, that's not the reason. I talk about my son to try to perhaps reach other mothers so they would talk about their son, and then we can organize. Because I would speak up for my son if he was in hell, because I would want them to cool the fire down, give him a break, you know. So I don't need no reason, no excuse to speak up for mine. But if we speak up together, that's when we can make a difference.
You've been traveling back and forth to not just TAMS, but to other prisons as well, have you not?
That's true. I go to Pontiac. For over 10 years, I was visiting out in Menard. I was visiting the inmates on death row. And I started doing that because I actually felt so helpless in my son's case. I felt like I couldn't help him, and I felt pitiful. No one was listening to me. I was trying to explain, and it was like, well, guess you would say that's your son. So somehow I got this message, inkling that I should go to the least of them. My son is not on death row. So I decided to join the coalition, and I went to death row. And that was when I actually came in contact with other inmates who were telling my story over and over. The things that they said happened to them, the reason why they signed confessions, or the reasons that different things had occurred in their lives that caused them to be on death row. It was hearing my story over and over, so I no longer felt unique, or like I was being picked on. I said it was God's way of showing me, see, you're not alone. I wasn't picking on you, I chose you. And it was because of my suffering and my pain that I was able to identify with other people who were stagnant. They couldn't reach out because they were in so much pain. But I want them to know that once you start speaking out, expressing what you feel, sharing what you're going through, it gets easier and easier. So I'm no longer ashamed. I'm proud of the fact that I have been able to endure this pain and let it become, instead of me being a victim, I see myself as a survivor who's out here to tell my story.
Well, you know, it's interesting, Marielle, when you think about how we can feel compassion for people who are worse off than we are, without really recognizing that, in a real sense, our civil liberties are on death row.
That's it.
You know, so, you know, here we are, and we're, you know, certainly to be behind bars instead of in front of them has got to be more comfortable. But at the same time, because we have allowed others to be exploited and to be treated unjustly, as you pointed out, now it's at our doors. And Martin Luther King said so aptly, injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. And so now we see it everywhere, and Liane Casten is looking at it everywhere and writing about it in the Media Watch, in the Chicago Media Watch. What are you seeing when you look over the landscape of the country, Liane?
I see scary.
You see scary.
Yeah. It is the worst time I can remember in American history. I am finding that inch by inch, it's not just the prisons. It's our ability to speak out. It's our ability to assemble. It's our ability to say openly what we would like to say without feeling that we're going to either lose our job or be condemned, okay? That's just closing down. We are now listening, we are now enduring a mindset that says there is one politically correct way to think. And if we deviate from that politically correct way to think, we're going to be in deep trouble. We're going to have to take some kind of consequence. Now, I don't know what kind of consequence that means, but there's a kind of level of fear that we better not speak out, we better not ask the tough questions, because they are going to put us down somewhere on a book. They've got a database on us already. They are already, and all of this, every bit of it, is all under the guise of the war on terror. Let me assure you, I will stand up in the middle of State and Madison and stay it. It's not because of the war on terror. It's population control, and I'm not too sure the reason for it. I'm not positive, but 911 was the best gift that they out there had, and they're clamping down. I've heard of people getting up and saying, questioning 911 and being booed off the podium because we are now in a mindset that we dare not ask those questions. Now, this is scary to me. And this is not the America I was raised. This is not the civics courses that I used to take. Okay? I took a civics course that said, I have a right to assemble with people I want to assemble with, and I have a right to speak when I want to speak, and I have a right to a minority opinion. And that somehow is closing down on us now. So yes, I am getting very, very nervous. And part of this is, of course, the media. Okay? We are now talking about, as I have in my possession, our media map of Chicago, okay? We have a media map of Chicago identifying the 7 major corporations that own in depth all media outlets, except National Public Radio, which is the local affiliate is NPR, is WBEZ. And so we're talking about General Electric, Disney, News Corporation, Viacom, the Tribune Company, Hollinger International, and Clear Channel Communications. They own radio stations, television stations, they own cable stations, they own print, they own even magazines. It's broad and it's deep. And guess what we're getting? We're getting the same stuff on almost all of it. As an investigative journalist, my market for printing stories is getting smaller and smaller because I can't print what I'd like to be able to say, except for a very few progressive magazines that are still out there struggling because they don't have a lot of money. They're almost always in debt. They're almost always coming from the red, and they are always just one step away, but they print what they know to be the minority opinion. My heavens, and how many people read the minority opinion? Maybe 100,000 in the nation, maybe 35 or 40,000 in these Times, which is locally produced. Maybe Ms. Magazine might have a few more subscribers. But we are talking about millions that subscribe to Time, that subscribe to Newsweek, that subscribe to U.S. News and World Report, and they're being given the carefully controlled stuff. Now, why are they taking it? Because today, industry and government are working hand in hand. General Electric, which owns NBC, is one of the biggest nuclear polluters one of the biggest polluters of PCBs in the country.
PCBs?
Yes, PCBs is a chlorinated compound that will give us cancer and other nasty problems.
And it's in a number of things in the environment,
That's right.
including the water.
Well, it will pollute the water, it will pollute the air, and it will pollute our bodies. And PCBs have been flushed into, now this is not Chicago, I grant you, PCBs have been flushed into the Hudson River, way up there, way at the mouth of the Hudson River by General Electric, and it is so powerful a contaminant. People don't fish from the Hudson River. This is out of New York State, and they dare not swim in the Hudson River, and they can't drink from the Hudson River because the PCBs are so powerful. Finally, the United States Environmental Protection Agency, which for all practical purposes today is out to lunch. They are just brain dead. They are no longer enforcing what they should be enforcing. They finally got some kind of vague agreement that General Electric will begin to clean up the PCBs. I mean, we're talking years. And this stuff is long-lived in the environment, okay? So, okay, that's what owns NBC. And NBC now owns all kinds of magazines and all kinds of print and all kinds of cable, and they also sell refrigerators. Now, tell me, there's a serious conflict of interest. No one that makes missiles and refrigerators, no business has any business owning media. That's already a major conflict of interest. It's a lockout of valuable information we need to hear. A lockout. There's nothing left. So we have to really search to get some of the alternative media that will give us an alternative point of view. And that's, again, a deprivation of our civil liberties. What is the media doing today? They're putting blankets on our brains. We don't really know what the heck is going on. We have no clue. What's really going on in Washington are men in great secrecy. It's the most secret government we've ever had. And they are now deciding that we're supposed to rat on each other. 1 million, is it 1 million people? 1 out of 24 is going to be a spy, a designated spy to tell the agencies, whatever those agencies are, whether there's someone suspicious who's doing something that isn't kosher. God help us. They used to do that in Red China. Children were trained to spy on their parents. They
used to do that in Nazi Germany.
They did that in Nazi Germany. They did that under communism with the Stasis, S-T-A-S-I. We are now asking more people to spy on each other than the Stasis ever had.
And they do that in the prisons.
They're doing that in the prisons, too.
That's why prisons are a microcosm of what we need to be watching and observing.
Thank you.
Because this is what they intend for society. When you mention about going to school, what you learn in school about civil liberties and so forth, it's almost just the opposite with me. I learned after I got to be a certain age that the Constitution that I had learned about didn't include me. You know, so what they was doing to me as a person, it was something that no one paid any attention to. Mm-hmm. And that's why, like we mentioned what Dr. King said, this is what's happening. Mm-hmm. What they have done to the least of people all the time, now they planning on doing
happening to us.
Doing to the rest of them.
It's happening to the rest of us.
This is why when we speak out, we are made examples of. Mm-hmm. That's why the others won't say anything. Mm-hmm. Fear. Now they're coming after other people.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
They're not going to allow you to say anything. And
That's
you say,
right.
what? Mm-hmm. Well, this is what they always did to us. My son is in Tams, not because of him being the worst of the worst. He had never had a ticket. I have a picture in there where he had a truce going on among the inmates to end the gang violence. That's their picture. Now they no longer can have pictures, see? But I got that picture. And see, this is why when they sent him there, they said when he was interviewed, he said, "I don't know why I was sent here." So the interviewer, she said, "Well, I'll check. I'll tell you why you were sent here." And she went rambling through the papers, and she said, "I don't see why you were sent here either.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll tell you why. Because he has dignity, and he was influencing the guys.
Mm-hmm.
He was telling them young guys, 'You're not being smart. I thought I was being smart. Don't do that. If you go out of here, you better not come back in while I'm here.'" That's what he was telling them. He was telling them, you go to school while you're in here. Take the advantage of every situation. What did they do? They stopped all those situations. They can't take the advantage of them now. And anyone who had any outspoken spirits or had any pride about themselves, had any kind of family connection like my son had, they locked him away.
They're going to squash those spirits.
People took it for granted. Oh, they must have did something. Well,
They're
now
gonna
they
squash the
planning
spirit.
on doing that to society.
That's right. They're going to squash our spirits.
Yeah.
Now, let me get back to something that we didn't even think about talking about, but I'm beginning to see connection. Now, first they come for the least of us. And now it's slipping like a cancer right through the road to the rest of us, okay?
That's right.
The destruction of our civil liberties, all right? But why are so many people not yet fighting? And I can give you an answer. One of the answers, it's not the only one, but one of the answers is our education system, which is now training people to perform perfunctory duties and take entry-level jobs, but there are no courses for vigorous debate. There are no courses that really do serious constitutional study. There are no courses that really take citizenship seriously. And I'll never forget, years ago, when I was a member of the volunteer member for Leadership for Quality Education. It was during a lot of the reform energy that was going on in the schools. And I was on the Education Task Force and the Communication Task Force. And I spoke to somebody in City Hall about how we needed to get back to some really good civic classes. And she says, "That's not what we're about, Liane. We are about just getting people trained for entry-level jobs." She said that to me.
Yeah.
And then I began to realize things that are bad are not accidental. There's always some kind of purpose. And if our goal is to reach the minds and the spirits of young people and really get them to soar, we would be doing that.
Yeah, but you know what they have to do, what you said, what's going on. Another reason why people don't get involved is because whenever they paint this picture, it don't look like them. You know, even the hijacker, number 20, he's a dark complexion. See, people don't identify with that.
It's not me.
See?
Yes.
When they talk about crime, the ones they keep projecting over and over, they're people of color.
That's right.
See, and so people are going along, oh, they're not talking about us. And usually when I talk to an audience of Caucasians, I point out to them that these laws that they have been putting in effect lately, they're not for people of color. They never did respect our civil rights. They
It's
could
not
always,
new, huh?
They could always kick down our door,
Okay.
and nobody would do anything.
Right.
They could stop my son whenever. I have a son who's 50 now. He joined the service because he got so tired of being humiliated by the police when he was out in the street. So we never had those rights. So when they changed the book, they changed them so they can come after the other people now. And they can't see it because they still see it as it's about them. But it's not about them, it's about us.
But that's just what Ashcroft said. It's okay if someone spies in your group, because if you're doing nothing wrong, you don't have to worry. What he's not adding is that, one, someone else somewhere might be doing something that's slightly questionable. okay? And if we don't protect that person out there who's doing something slightly questionable, eventually it'll hit us
right.
too.
That's
So
right.
we're not protecting each other yet, okay? It's going to get bad. It's going to get, no, I said it wrong. It's going to get worse. It's going to get worse because people aren't angry enough yet. People are not vocal enough yet. I see a lot of good stuff on the internet, okay? I see a lot of good stuff. But it's not reaching into George Q. Public yet. It's not reaching the McDonald's eaters. Okay?
Yeah. And you know, people tell me a lot of times when they do call me and they'll say, I don't know what to do. I've never been to jail. I don't know anything about the courts. You know, like I'm an expert. I've never been to jail either. And when it happened to me, it hadn't happened to me before. See, that's what goes on. When I say, when you want people to come and help you put out the fire in on your house, you know, you have to think back. Where were the buckets when their house was burning?
That's right.
We have to unite. I'm with
That's
a
right.
group now in Avondale, Hispanics group, you know, and now they're talking about attacking bilingual, you know. And they would love for me to get out and be a spokesperson for them now. So I told them, that's great. I could see them respecting their culture and so forth, but I couldn't open up my mouth and say anything about bilingual without mentioning African American history. Tell the history truthfully. You know, we don't need a month for Black history. We need to correct the history books. Tell it like way it should have been told, and we won't need that month because we were there all the time.
Well, I just really don't know how all of this misinformation and disinformation can be counteracted, you know, because for one thing, we may be in a period of what Eric Fromm called escape from freedom. Freedom imposes obligations on people. You have to take responsibilities. You have to make decisions. You have to be your brother's keeper. You have to take a stand. You know, you can't straddle the fence and all of that. And many times people don't want to take responsibility for their actions. They don't want to take responsibility for denouncing something that is obviously wrong. When you hear people try to decide whether or not it was all right to bludgeon and abuse a young man in handcuffs on TV, when you hear the weak explanations for why this happened and what all this young man in handcuffs was able to do while handcuffed, that could provoke trained law enforcement officers to perform in the way, to lose control actually, and to perform in the way that they did. When you see how people can strain reason to try to accommodate something that is just patently in your face wrong, and how they can live with it, then you know that, you know, I don't really think things have gotten worse, Liane. I think they have gotten worse for people who didn't know how bad they were all the time.
Oh, all right, then let's just say, you're not wrong, but let's just say it's now spreading. Okay? And that a different population is going to be affected. And a broader population is going to be affected. And once you start broadening the population base and move away from the Black world into the Muslim world, the Arab world, and possibly into the progressive world. Okay, let me tell you, you want to talk more about civil liberties? Whenever from now on there's a massive protest, or you've gotten the potential between 25 and 50,000 people marching down the street to protest the World Trade Organization, there are cameras up there taking your picture. And there are all sorts of people up there who are checking on you. And that's the group. Now, these are the people who are doing the marching and are doing it notwithstanding the fact they know they're being cameraed, they know their pictures are being taken, they know that somewhere along the way the computer's going to put this in a file, and one of these days that file is going to come up when the same person who was protesting on the streets of Washington went to a meeting And at that meeting, that same person spoke out against WTO. Okay? And crash, you've suddenly got a potential subversive. So we're talking about spying on individuals that we've never seen before with technology that we've never had before. They are really doing the spying. You got internet spying, you've got all sorts of stuff. Okay? So if we want to run through where the civil liberties are now the destruction of the civil liberties are now expanding, we can do it just through the Patriot Act. How dare we incarcerate with no attorney and no charges anyone in America?
That's right.
How can we do that?
But see, they've been doing it all the time. They
In the
never
black
did
community.
let us. They never did let us.
Thank
have an
you for
attorney.
letting me know that, because I've been brain dead to that, okay?
they did it
but
all the
suddenly,
time.
suddenly after 9/11, if you go through the 260-some pages of the Patriot Act, let me tell you, you're going to see one destruction of civil liberty after another, one after another, and suddenly it's become big news to all of us who are civil libertarians, all right?
And I point out to them that it's amazing that they can say how undereducated we are as people, but a young man can go before a judge and he will ask him a question like, do you understand? And read off the law to him.
Sure.
No, he don't understand what's going on.
How could he?
He don't understand. His mother before him didn't understand. And when you mention about the education system, they study in education now. They never did treat us fair. Everybody know we didn't get the amount of money that they give in certain areas. Everybody know that they just passed us on. When I go into the schools, I tell the children that. And when I passed in school, it was because I had good conduct,
Not because you could
nice
read well.
personality.
You were pleasant.
I had potentials, but they didn't care about them. They didn't encourage me to learn. They just picked out the ones they liked and passed us on, you know. And then when I finally got to college, that's when I learned that you're supposed to study. I thought I was going to have multiple choice questions. I wasn't prepared. So why should I be so heartbroken to find out that these children don't know? The ones who went before them weren't taught anything.
And if you will look, excuse me, at our latest Chicago Media Watch report, which is summer of the year 2002, Salim Muwakil talks about the drug war. Okay, the drug war on the black community. And when you start talking about your son who has some pride and has some leadership capacity, and what they're doing to him in a maximum prison like that is trying to take away his dignity and break his spirit. Okay, then I had to ask myself, why in the world where the drug war is one of the biggest frauds on the history of this planet, they've got PR going and coming all the time. There's no real drug war, there's other things going on. But why is it so destructive to the black community? And if we put two and two together, your son, if he were out walking the streets, could very well become a leader.
He is. He's one wherever he's at.
Okay. He could very well become a leader outside jail.
Yeah. And they know that, too.
They know that, and so they're not going to feel very comfortable. So the name of the game is to find ways to put more black men in jail. Now, I'm not the only one to say this. You all know this. This is part and parcel of the way you live your lives. More black men in jail under drug charges than any other, okay? There are more black men in jail. Now, why? It's really, from my point of view, because it doesn't mean that all black men who are in jail, and I'm saying that wrong, it doesn't mean that the white guys aren't also doing a lot of drugs, okay? They're just not being picked up the way the black guys are.
They're not being prosecuted.
Okay.
And it's called a disease. When white people use drugs, they call it a disease.
Okay.
They say it's not their fault.
Well, you know, they also redefined crack so that it carries a stiffer penalty.
That's right.
It is
okay.
it
Now
is
that's
not
a civil
some form of
libertarian issue
campaign.
there, right?
Yeah.
Right there.
It's not some form of cocaine. It's some other kind of chemical.
Yeah.
That's right.
And it carries a heavier penalty. There are all kinds of ways to visit
But it's
injustice
population
on
control.
people. Of course it is. When you take the
Gee, do I sound
childbearing,
radical?
when you take the males of childbearing age and separate them from the females of childbearing age, what better population control can you have?
Not
Simply
much.
they're not together, so there's no
Not much.
opportunity for them to reproduce themselves.
Right.
You know, this travesty is older than this century. You know,
Yes, it is.
this travesty began for us at least when African people were separated from their homeland, when they were forcibly taken from their native home, and when the children were kidnapped from their parents and taken, and their parents were taken hostage when they went in search of the children. No,
And not
that
allowed
right
to
has
read.
that wrong has never been righted.
No, no. it
You
hasn't.
cannot get blood from a turnip, and you cannot get justice from injustice. And, you know, whether people want to talk about reparations or not, quite frankly, I'm not interested in reparations. I'm interested in justice.
Right.
And I'm interested in what can be done to restore a people to their traditional greatness who have been robbed and abused over centuries, you know. And we've seen everything. We've seen everything. So if you want a description of what you can look forward to in the days ahead, all you have to do is read slave narratives.
Yeah.
You know, and there's a great interest in that. There are all kinds of our books out now. There's one called Soul by Soul, where they just talk about the slave markets. But when you read the slave narratives, when they tell you the kinds of experiences, and that we were undereducated, but we were not inexperienced. We learned from experience,
Oh,
and we
yeah.
knew that there was no crime that would not be committed against us at any age, of any gender, at any time, for any reason or for no reason. So we learned that early on. So if you want to see Frederick Douglass's speech of July 4th, is a very wonderful place when he talks about crimes that would disgrace a nation of savages. If you want to see
Yes.
the extent to which a nation can go to deprive people of their human rights, just go into anything that gives an honest discussion of the Atlantic slave trade, and you'll see it. But of course, racism has served its function because it has made people who are not of color believe that they are privileged and that these things could not possibly happen in their neck of the woods.
And that they're
you see?
better.
And it
Yeah.
is very frightening, you know, and very scary to them when it seems that that's a possibility. When drug addicts were all black people, you know, then the denigration stayed in the black community. But when young white children began to fall under the addiction of cocaine and now ecstasy and I don't know, all kinds of designer drugs, then all of a sudden there's this great alarm. It has to strike in places where people have at least the illusion of power before something can be done about it. Because as long as it's happening to the least of these, we know. You know, people think it happened to you because you did something wrong. You know, certainly if you are suffering, certainly if you are homeless, if you are starving, if you are jobless, you have not done something, because this is America, the land of equal opportunity. And if you go to school and get a good education, you will get a good job and you will live the good life.
Are you
And
spouting the
don't-
cliches on purpose?
You don't have to care about the stock market. If you follow the formula, listen, if you follow the formula, then you will live happily ever after, you see. And so when reality begins to assert itself and you find out that you did all of these things and now you have a master's degree and you are walking around jobless because some corporation was corrupt at its top and now it is either under investigation or it has been dismantled and everybody has run off with their millions to some desert island to live happily ever after. When that reality hits, then, you know, I'd be very afraid, actually, to have people spying on people these days, because I don't think there are too many people who are mentally healthy. You know, I think that to have your reality crash like that has got to throw you off balance a whole lot. And so if somebody who was a recent employee of Enron were spying on somebody else, I wouldn't know what they might be seeing.
Well, you mentioned an interesting topic, though, mental health, okay? Part of our ability to be healthy is our ability to face reality. And one of the things that Americans have developed an absolute PhD expertise in is denial. D-E-N-I-A-L, okay?
Yeah.
So if we are into denial about so much, it's going to take a lot, including being hit over the head, for us to really face up to the slow encroachment of things that we really believed were part of our heritage. We really believed it.
You know, that's
Okay.
part of the cure. When you mention about that, you find, I know I have a friend, and that's what she felt close enough for me to ask me the question. She says she wanted to know why should she feel badly about what was happening to blacks? You know, because she didn't bring slaves here. She had no part of it and so forth. And I told her, I said, I really appreciate you asking me that, because what you're looking at now, when you look at me, I'm the results of that. No one brought me over here in a ship either. But my ancestors, that mentality was passed down to me. And it took the struggle I went through with my son for me to be able to identify with slaves. For so long, I couldn't even identify with them. That was so humiliating to see them, you know, treated the way they were, in chains. But when I went through that struggle with my son, I went all the way back. Now I know what my ancestors experienced.
That's right.
Because my sons got to an age where I could no longer tell them I wanted them to grow up and be men. I started telling them, be nice. Don't say nothing about this. And you know, because
Don't cause any trouble.
I realized that I couldn't protect my son. And I got that in the pamphlet too. I got a fact sheet from the police department that they was going to use to try to get my son to confess to a crime.
Oh my God.
And
he
they
didn't do it?
they threatened to come and get me off my job and drag me off handcuffed. And that's when the attorney said he was fixing to sign the confession. And I told her, I said, you get to him and you tell him.
Not to do it.
I don't know where he think he got his spirit from. But he got it directly from me. I'm just as tough as he is. And I don't want him to sign nothing. We'll fight if we have to fight for the rest of our lives for justice. But don't sign, because I learned the worst thing a black man can do is plead bargaining. And half of them in the jails, that's what they did. They plead bargain because of the fear. And that's what my son would be dead now if he had signed that confession.
Oh my.
But you're also talking about facing your reality, okay? You're talking about suddenly, because a crisis came into your life,
Yeah.
and instead of saying, I don't want to have anything to do with my son, I'm cutting him off, he's a bad boy, he shamed me, what you did was walk right through that fence, that barbed wire fence, and got on the other side, and you started finding some truth for yourself.
Well, my unconditional love for my son couldn't go away.
But that takes,
Well,
that
you know,
takes
ladies,
courage.
I don't want to take you too far afield from the conversation, but I want you to understand one of the reasons why black people have been able to survive what we call the Ma'afa. Other people call it Holocaust. It's because we have this very profound belief in God.
Oh, yeah.
And you can stare reality in the face when you have that connection. And if you don't have that connection, then you perish, because there are just too many forms of terror in this society. I mean, we've experienced the lynchings and the rapes and just the humiliation that you pointed out. You know, you don't have to be strip searched to be humiliated. You can be treated as though you are nothing at all. You can be dismissed, held in contempt, treated like you're a child when you're fully a grown adult. You know, those kinds of things are damaging to the spirit. They put pain in your psyche. And those kinds of things become indelible. You know, they're like brands. You know, you've heard of branding horses.
Yeah.
They used to brand slaves, but there's a branding of the spirit that can happen when you are continuously abused and continuously held in contempt. But the thing that has enabled Black people to be so resilient in the face of all of that is this profound belief in God. No matter what name God is given, we will connect, we will call God by whatever name appears to be appropriate, but we will always know that there is a higher power, and we will always know that that higher power is not in the White House, and it is and is not an elected public official. We always knew that, and we know that still. Yeah. And so when we look at the stock market, and we look at the attacks, you know, on the civil liberties, and we look at all of the things, but we never ever forget that we did not make ourselves, and that the Creator who made us is more powerful from anything that is transient on this earth. And so that's one of the things that enable us. Now, that does not mean that while we know that we simply sit it out, because our leaders have shown us this. Martin Luther King believed that profoundly, but he gave his life in the struggle for civil rights.
Yes.
Malcolm X believed that profoundly. What can you do with someone who is praying 5 times a day? The Christians talk about being prayed up. If Muslims are not prayed up, I don't know who can be prayed up, because they are constantly in prayer.
Yeah.
So those people who have that kind of spiritual connection know that this is not all there is, and know that you know, in a sense, what we're looking at is the Wizard of Oz, that when you finally snatch back the curtain, you're going to find flashing neon lights and smoke and bells and whistles, you know, but nothing of any real essence. So it gets ludicrous, but it doesn't get ludicrous before we are sobered by the thought that the Wiz is a terrorist and will terrorize people and will cause great discomfort in the human population until such time as human beings understand that they have a responsibility to be each other's brothers' keepers. That's why we have to care about the least of these. That's why it would have been more important to be right than to have been white, Liane. That was the lesson for Caucasians to learn, that the best thing to be was right. And you know, Minister Farrakhan said that. You know, he said he was not interested in whether or not this group of people or that group of people occupied the territory. The right people ought to be there.
Yeah.
You see? So if we always stood for right, then we wouldn't be bought out. We wouldn't sell out to color. We wouldn't sell out to all these things that we're given in substitution, because we've actually accepted trinkets. We've accepted things of transient value.
I don't see how you can possibly say that when we're commercialized to absolute death. And my identity and your identity depends on that damn brand that you're going to wear on your shirt.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes.
Where's yours?
I have none.
I'm not wearing any.
I have no identity,
Okay,
all right?
okay.
And the whole point is that as long as you've got these ads and as long as you've got media so pervasive, what we really have then is a distortion of values, because I have to believe that if I don't have the right car and I'm not in the right club and I'm not buying the right home in the right place, okay, that I am less than. And it's getting back to your spiritual connection that gives you the balance that you need. Okay? Because without that, then you have no other value system except the value system of acquisition. And once you have the value system of acquisition, you destroy your soul. There's nothing left.
And what profited a man to
Sure.
gain the whole world
And
lose his own soul?
of course.
So, you know, what is the, you know, what is the value of things that are corruptible? Things that are transient, trinkets, things that you can't take it with you.
But those
Things
things
that cannot endure.
That's fine. Okay? We know that. And that's the preacher
No,
talking.
we don't know that.
Oh, but. Well, hold on. That's the preacher talking. But I am telling you that we've got another religion. And one of the heads of one of the biggest advertising agencies in the world actually said, we now have a new religion and it's brand names. And people are being literally manipulated by brand names. I have that on a piece of paper. I copied it off the internet with the quote, a whole bit. The new religion is brand names. And then once you disconnect from the morality, from what's right, from a spiritual connection, and you simply walk away into the brand names, you're caught. And there are millions of Americans who are caught. They don't know anymore because they've been seduced by the brilliance of these ads. And it's not a civil liberties issue, I grant you that. But it is an issue of such profundity that until we find a way to pull Americans back into a world where they understand the deeper values other than the brand names. Look at those kids killing each other for a bloody Nike shoe, okay? And until we get to the point where we can find that deeper message, I think we are going to have a problem reaching some people.
And I think when we start looking at the effect that these corporations have on these people, the damage that they're doing, instead of calling it white collar crime, you know, like it don't really matter that much because
It's beginning to infiltrate the psyche of the American people that those white collar bastards out there are taking all that money and they are leaving the rest of the people unemployed.
But
it's without pension.
They just want to increase the amount of time that they're going to ask them to serve after years and years. But Malcolm always said that whenever we use our strength as a yardstick to measure another man's weaknesses, then our strength becomes our weaknesses. And that's what's going on. People measuring themselves by other people,
okay,
you know,
but hang
better
loose.
than.
There's something else that's moving here. When we really have brilliant advertising campaigns, we have done the focus group, we've done the market research, we know what's going to buzz that person. We know what this product is going to do for the psyche of that person because we have explored that. It is brilliant and it is psychological research and it is done with calculated understanding of how this message is going to impact on that buying market. It's no longer an individual, it's a market.
Yeah, but what she said is very important. When she said the spiritual part of it. See, when we get that connection, and I think where we lost is that we forgot who our real God was, and we start idolizing the people who had oppressed us. That's who we was looking for. And even in the jails, it's so beautiful to see. They have taken everything from it, and those brothers, some of them have connected so with God, they just look beautiful. That's why they want to kill them. Because if they would let some of those men back out in the street,
those men
they
would
could
be
change.
Those men would be dangerous leaders in the social
because
structure.
they went through that part where all that advertising got to them, and they got mixed up and they got confused. But like I told them, God said, "Peace be still." They took everything from them, pushed them down as low as they could go, and they couldn't do nothing but rise back. And they are spiritually ready to come back out here and change the world. See?
Oh, we could use some of those good men.
Yeah, and they know it too. That's why they building more Supermaxes than ever. They're not for people who are violent. And I got a sheet that will tell you that it's not for violent people.
Oh, really?
It's for people who have charisma.
Inner strength.
And who are subject to become leaders and can tell them, you know, give orders
Sounds
out.
like something I read in the Bible.
Yeah,
Folks running with their sons,
yeah.
trying to keep them from being slaughtered.
That's why it's nothing new.
There's nothing new under the sun.
Variations of it, though.
It's not
Okay.
new.
Well, you know, we make choices. You know, we do make choices. And even though there are very brilliant ad campaigns and all kinds of things to seduce us into all kinds of avenues of overconsumption and sin, if you want to say it, you know, we do make choices. We are given opportunities to get a glimmer of truth here and there. You've got Chicago Media Watch. You know, people can choose to subscribe. That people can get a library card and go to the library. You'd be surprised. There are all kinds of information available to you.
Right.
They have not yet sacked the libraries as they did the Library of
stop.
Alexandria.
Stop.
Well, you better do it in about 2 seconds.
All right, they're asking the librarians to report to the CIA and the FBI people who
what
take out
people are
certain
reading.
kinds of
Certain
books.
books, yeah, they
That's
Well,
right.
now you have to
and
go
they're
to the
asking the
library and read in
librarians
the
to do
library.
this, okay? And we are having Judith Krug, who is the intellectual property person for the American Library Association, come to a large event on the 28th, which is next Sunday, to talk about this, how they're asking who is taking out what books.
Well, you know, when you think
That's civil
about it-
liberties.
But you know what? Listen, when you think about this, with all of the, what is it, all these alphabets, CIA, FBI, whatever, with all of that intelligence did not prevent us from the loss that we suffered on September the 11th. So, I mean, how we just keep collecting data, but we still are not able
Nor
to
will it
protect
prevent-
ourselves from people who decide that they want to do harm to us
That's
as
right.
a people.
And it will not prevent, all these terrorist measures will not prevent another terrorist attack, because there is information out there that maybe this terrorist attack didn't have to happen.
Well, we have to say God is the greatest, and if we do our best, God will do the rest.
Well, we believe that profoundly. We do believe that profoundly, but we wish that the bad guys would stop trying to compete with the Most High, because it is very stressful for those of us who have to be here and watch this movie. I thank you for watching us. Please join us again on Fridays at 8:30, and Sundays the programs are repeated at 3:30. And I thank my guest, Liane Casten from Chicago Media Watch, and Marielle Johnson, a civil rights activist, a mother, a strong black woman who has been fighting on the side for justice and continues to do it. And I think if you want to contribute to something, it would be a good idea to contribute to the work of either one of these women, because you need to help somebody, or help somebody yourself.